Yo, check 1 2, man. What's good, y'all? I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chases, man. Before I get things started, as I always do, man, I want to give a shout out to all the haters out there, man. Hope y'all having a good afternoon. If you're coming in, man, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification button so you can stay abreast of what's going on here on the Green Gorilla channel. And as I always do, I'd like to dedicate some time, allocate a few moments to signal some appreciation to the people who support the channel on an ongoing basis. So in that regard, man, shout out to Dub Will, Seven Coast Dojo, Blacksword 404, Red Falls Black, Electrician 480, Sherlin Woe, Be Conscious Black Honey, Broken Blade, Brotherly Love, Inherently Intuitive and Shadow Observer. Big up. Shout out to Stefan Jastek, Free Agent for Life, Andre, Damian H, J. Cleveland Green, Bingo Gerard Shelton, Hostile Adept, Dar, and an honest look at the end. Thank you. Shout out to Roderick Jackson, Cutting Up with the Jones, Void Be Free, Zanko 1, Cornelius Bellamy, Salty Balls, Mike Johnston, No Sleep, Tel Toya, and Divine Love Ridge. Big up. Shout out to Timothy Blewett, Wild Bear 50, Sunra 44, Barnolas, BGS Ibmore, Mantis on Break, Lock Vegas, BMROC, Passport OG, Rasheed Barnes, and Leon 008. Big up. Shout out Mr. Good Dad, Third Coast X, Michael Ross, 63rd Samurai, Ishmael Samad, The Watcher, The Ruthless Heartless Revelator, Kill the Game, Dr. Thunder, Jason Hills, and Charles Finney. Big up. Big up Interesting Thought, The Silent Warrior, Naomi Gary, The Black Toxic Masculinist, Seek Truth, Larry R, Seth Sun, Afro Troop, Show Me, Spain Man, and Anthony Davis. Big up. Shout out to I'm Just Jules, Ricky Dawson, True 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish the Billmonger, Adrian Thomas, and D. Scott. Big up. Shout out Path Guy 74, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Vince Lindsay, Quiz the Poet, Black Wizard, Troy Warren, KP Bailey, Mrs. KP Bailey rather, Alan Wiley, The Face and Life of Commerce. Big up. Shout out AI Apostle, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Adam, Ignatz Mouse, Dr. Tree 33, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S, and Charles Rogers. Big up. Shout out Rick Ross, Charles Gilmore 3, Greg, Very Little, Mr. Valentino, Dr. Rock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach DC, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, and Drew Main. Thank you. Shout out to Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, Aaron Smith, DHA Double, Kalon, Chakala, and WPR1. Big up, man. Also on the Patreon side, man, shout out to Chidubim Imari, Frank Black, Robert Wicks, Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby the Tetrahedron, J Live, Keith Bass, Nick Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, Waffle Weave, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Pursuer, Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Jay Bailey, Mo Mal, and the Sangwa. Big up to y'all, man. Thank you. And also, I can't forget David Carroll, Force Windu, and Kevin Samuels. Big up. Thank you for supporting the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis. I really appreciate it. And if you want to support the Green Gorilla channel because you appreciate what's done here, man, here's how you do it. I'll be back. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, man, I'm back, man. I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chases. And so what I've been doing is reading selections from Kimberlé Crenshaw in order to explain what her theory really is. I mean, there's secondary literature about it, but primarily I'm interested in digging into the primary literature to see what she's actually written to find out like why she came to the conclusions that she's come to, okay? Now, the first paper I read primarily was just about race. Wasn't really talking about intersectionality at all, but this paper here that I'm going to read to you, she discusses intersectionality for the first time in an academic, formal way, okay? So having said all that, I'm just going to get right to it. It's going to take only about, I say, 35, 36 minutes for me to run through this, after which, if you have any comments at all, you can comment. But yeah, let's just get to it, man. So let me get everything queued up here. What's good, everybody? I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. Today, I'll be reading an article written by Kimberlé Crenshaw entitled Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black Feminist Critique of Anti-Discrimination Doctrine, Feminist Theory, and Anti-Racist Politics. The article appears in the University of Chicago Legal Forum. It was published in 1989, issue number 1, article number 8. But before I begin, I'd like to make some remarks. In the first section of this article, Kimberlé Crenshaw lays the groundwork for her argument by discussing the limitations of legal doctrine in addressing intersectional discrimination. She cites specific court cases like DeGraffenreid versus General Motors, Moore versus Hughes Helicopters Incorporated, and Payne versus Travenol to illustrate how the legal system fails to recognize the unique forms of discrimination faced by black women. In these cases, black women were unable to file discrimination claims that simultaneously considered both race and gender. The courts insisted on treating these categories as mutually exclusive, thereby erasing the unique intersectional experiences of black women. So the first section serves as an indictment of the legal system's inability to grapple with complex, layered forms of discrimination. The second section delves into the broader implications of this doctrinal failure. Crenshaw argues that the marginalization of black women is not just a legal issue, but also a problem in feminist and civil rights discourse. Both feminist and anti-racist politics have often overlooked black women, either absorbing their experiences into broader categories of women or blacks, or marginalizing them as too different for collective action. She critiques the dominant framework of discrimination, which she argues is too narrow and process-oriented, focusing only on explicit disadvantages rather than systemic issues. This narrow focus, she contends, perpetuates the marginalization of black women, not just in law, but also in social justice movements. While Crenshaw's work has been groundbreaking, it's not without its critics. Scholars like Adolph Reed, Tommy Curry, and Jim Sedanius offer various critiques that challenge the framework of intersectionality. These critics argue that Crenshaw's intersectionality promotes an additive model of discrimination, which doesn't always hold up under empirical scrutiny. The double jeopardy thesis, which suggests that black women face twice the oppression, is often not supported by data that explore how oppression actually operates outside the legal sphere. For example, Jim Sedanius argues that intersectionality fails to account for phenomena like the subordinate male target hypothesis, which suggests that in hierarchical societies, it's often the males of the subordinate group who are the primary targets of violence and discrimination. Also, Tommy Curry brings in the concept of anti-black misandry to challenge the notion of black male privilege. He argues that the visibility of black men is not a form of privilege, but a form of targeted discrimination, often leading to lethal outcomes. Curry's critique is not aimed at expanding intersectionality, but at demonstrating its limitations as an analytical framework for understanding complex social phenomena like anti-black racism and sexism. Both Curry and Sedanius push for a more empirically grounded approach to understanding discrimination, challenging the broad applicability of intersectionality beyond legal cases. By presenting these criticisms, perhaps we can better appreciate the complexities and limitations of intersectionality as a framework for understanding systemic oppression. While it can be said that Crenshaw's work laid down some essential foundations, the discourse has evolved, and these criticisms offer avenues for a more nuanced and empirically grounded discussion. Introduction. One of the very few black women's studies books is entitled, "All the Women Are White, All the Blacks Are Men, but Some of Us Are Brave." I have chosen this title as a point of departure in my efforts to develop a black feminist criticism because it sets forth a problematic consequence of the tendency to treat race and gender as mutually exclusive categories of experience and analysis. In this talk, I want to examine how this tendency is perpetuated by a single axis framework that is dominant in anti-discrimination law and that is also reflected in feminist theory and anti-racist politics. I will center black women in this analysis in order to contrast the multidimensionality of black women's experience with a single axis analysis that distorts these experiences. Not only will this juxtaposition reveal how black women are theoretically erased, it will also illustrate how this framework imports its own theoretical limitations that undermine efforts to broaden feminist and anti-racist analysis. With black women as the starting point, it becomes more apparent how dominant conceptions of discrimination condition disadvantage occurring along a single categorical axis. I want to suggest further that this single axis framework erases black women in the conceptualization, identification, and remediation of race and sex discrimination by limiting inquiry to the experiences of otherwise privileged members of the group. In other words, in race discrimination cases, discrimination tends to be viewed in terms of sex or class privileged blacks. In sex discrimination cases, the focus is on race and class privileged women. This focus on the most privileged group members marginalizes those who are multiply burdened and obscures claims that cannot be understood as resulting from discrete sources of discrimination. I suggest further that this focus on otherwise privileged group members creates a distorted analysis of racism and sexism because the operative conceptions of race and sex become grounded in experiences that actually represent only a subset of a much more complex phenomena. After examining the doctrinal manifestations of this single axis framework, I will discuss how it contributes to the marginalization of black women in feminist theory and in anti-racist politics. I argue that black women are sometimes excluded from feminist theory and anti-racist policy discourse because both are predicated upon a discrete set of experiences that often does not accurately reflect the interaction of race and gender. These problems of exclusion cannot be solved simply by including black women within an already established analytical structure. Because the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism, any analysis that does not take intersectionality into account cannot sufficiently address the particular manner in which black women are subordinated. Thus, for feminist theory and anti-racist policy discourse to embrace the experiences and concerns of black women, the entire framework that has been used as a basis for translating women's experience or the black experience into concrete policy demands must be rethought and recast. As examples of theoretical and political developments that missed the mark with respect to black women because of their failure to consider intersectionality, I will briefly discuss the feminist critique of rape and separate spheres of ideology, and the public policy debates concerning female-headed households within the black community. Section 1, the Anti-Discrimination Framework. Subsection A, the experience of intersectionality and the doctrinal response. One way to approach the problem of intersectionality is to examine how courts frame and interpret the stories of black women plaintiffs. While I cannot claim to know the circumstances underlying the cases that I will discuss, I nevertheless believe that the way courts interpret claims made by black women is itself part of black women's experience and, consequently, a cursory review of cases involving black female plaintiffs is quite revealing. To illustrate the difficulties inherent in judicial treatment of intersectionality, I will consider 3 Title VII cases: DeGraffenreid versus General Motors, Moore versus Hughes Helicopter, and Payne versus Travenol. Subsection 1, DeGraffenreid versus General Motors. In DeGraffenreid, 5 black women brought suit against General Motors, alleging that the employer's seniority system perpetuated the effects of past discrimination against black women. Evidence adduced at trial revealed that General Motors simply did not hire black women prior to 1964, and that all of the black women hired after 1970 lost their jobs in a seniority-based layoff during a subsequent recession. The district court granted summary judgment for the defendant, rejecting the plaintiff's attempt to bring a suit not on behalf of blacks or women, but specifically on behalf of black women. The court stated, "Plaintiffs have failed to cite any decisions which have stated that black women are a special case to be protected from discrimination. The court's own research has failed to disclose such a decision. The plaintiffs are clearly entitled to a remedy if they have been discriminated against. However, they should not be allowed to combine statutory remedies to create a new super remedy, which would give them relief beyond what the drafters of the relevant statutes intended. Thus, this lawsuit must be examined to see if it states a cause of action for race discrimination, sex discrimination, or alternatively either, but not a combination of both." Although General Motors did not hire black women prior to 1964, the court noted that General Motors has hired female employees for a number of years prior to the enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Because General Motors did hire women, albeit white women, during the period that no black women were hired, there was, in the court's view, no sex discrimination that the seniority system could conceivably have perpetuated. After refusing to consider the plaintiff's sex discrimination claim, the court dismissed the race discrimination complaint and recommended its consolidation with another case alleging race discrimination against the same employer. The plaintiffs responded that such consolidation would defeat the purpose of their suit, since theirs was not purely a race claim, but an action brought specifically on behalf of black women alleging race and sex discrimination. The court, however, reasoned, "The legislative history surrounding Title VII does not indicate that the goal of the statute was to create a new classification of black women who would have greater standing than, for example, a black male. The prospect of the creation of new classes of protected minorities, governed only by the mathematical principles of permutation and combination, clearly raises the prospect of opening the hackneyed Pandora's box." Thus, the court apparently concluded that Congress either did not contemplate that black women could be discriminated against as black women, or did not intend to protect them when such discrimination occurred. The court's refusal in DeGraffenreid to acknowledge that black women encounter combined race and sex discrimination implies that the boundaries of sex and race discrimination doctrine are defined respectively by white women's and black men's experiences. Under this view, black women are protected only to the extent that their experiences coincide with those of either of the two groups. Where their experiences are distinct, Black women can expect little protection as long as approaches such as that in DeGraffenreid, which completely obscure problems of intersectionality, prevail. Section 2. Moore versus Hughes Helicopter Incorporated. Moore versus Hughes Helicopters Incorporated presents a different way in which courts fail to understand or recognize Black women's claims. Moore is typical of a number of cases in which courts refuse to certify Black females as class representatives in class and sex discrimination actions. In Moore, the plaintiff alleged that the employer, Hughes Helicopter, practiced race and sex discrimination in promotions to upper-level craft positions and to supervisory jobs. Moore introduced statistical evidence establishing a significant disparity between men and women and somewhat less of a disparity between Black and white men in supervisory jobs. Affirming the district court's refusal to certify Moore as the class representative in the sex discrimination complaint on behalf of all women at Hughes, the Ninth Circuit noted approvingly. Moore had never claimed before the EEOC that she was discriminated against as a female, but only as a Black female. This raised serious doubts as to Moore's ability to adequately represent white female employees. The curious logic in Moore reveals not only the narrow scope of anti-discrimination doctrine and its failure to embrace intersectionality, but also the centrality of white female experiences in the conceptualization of gender discrimination. One inference that could be drawn from the court's statement that Moore's complaint did not entail a claim of discrimination against females is that discrimination against Black females is something less than discrimination against females. More than likely, however, the court meant to imply that Moore did not claim that all females were discriminated against, but only Black females. But even thus, recast, the court's rationale is problematic for Black women. The court rejected Moore's bid to represent all females, apparently because her attempt to specify her race was seen as being at odds with the standard allegation that the employer simply discriminated against females. The court failed to see that the absence of a racial referent does not necessarily mean that the claim being made is a more inclusive one. A white woman claiming discrimination against females may be in no better position to represent all women than a Black woman who claims discrimination as a Black female and wants to represent all females. The court's preferred articulation of against females is not necessarily more inclusive. It just appears to be so because the racial contours of the claim are not specified. The court's preference for against females rather than against Black females reveals the implicit grounding of white female experiences in the doctrinal conceptualization of sex discrimination. For white women, claiming sex discrimination is simply a statement that but for gender, they would not have been disadvantaged. For them, there is no need to specify discrimination as white females because their race does not contribute to the disadvantage for which they seek redress. The view of discrimination that is derived from this grounding takes race privilege as a given. Discrimination against a white female is thus the standard sex discrimination claim. Claims that diverge from this standard appear to present some sort of hybrid claim. More significantly, because Black females' claims are seen as hybrid, they sometimes cannot represent those who may have pure claims of sex discrimination. The effect of this approach is that even though a challenged policy or practice may clearly discriminate against all females, the fact that it has particularly harsh consequences for Black females places Black female plaintiffs at odds with white females. Moore illustrates one of the limitations of anti-discrimination laws' remedial scope and normative vision: the refusal to allow a multiply disadvantaged class to represent others who may be singularly disadvantaged defeats efforts to restructure the redistribution of opportunity and limits remedial relief to minor adjustments within an established hierarchy. Consequently, bottom-up approaches, those which combine all discriminatees in order to challenge an entire employment system, are foreclosed by the limited view of the wrong and the narrow scope of the available remedy. If such bottom-up intersectional representation were routinely permitted, employees might accept the possibility that there is more to gain by collectively challenging the hierarchy rather than by each discriminatee individually seeking to protect her source of privilege within the hierarchy. But as long as anti-discrimination doctrine proceeds from the premise that employment systems need only minor adjustments, opportunities for advancement by disadvantaged employees will be limited. Relatively privileged employees probably are better off guarding their advantage while jockeying against others to gain more. As a result, Black women, the class of employees which, because of its intersectionality, is best able to challenge all forms of discrimination, are essentially isolated and often required to fend for themselves. In Moore, the court's denial of the plaintiff's bid to represent all Blacks and females left Moore with the task of supporting her race and sex discrimination claims with statistical evidence or discrimination against Black females alone. Because she was unable to represent white women or Black men, she could not use overall statistics on sex disparity at Hughes, nor could she use statistics on race. Proving her claim using statistics on Black women alone was no small task, due to the fact that she was bringing the suit under a disparate impact theory of discrimination. The court further limited the relevant statistical pool to include only Black women who it determined were qualified to fill the openings in upper-level labor jobs and in supervisory positions. According to the court, Moore had not demonstrated that there were any qualified Black women within her bargaining unit or the general labor pool for either category of jobs. Finally, the court stated that even if it accepted Moore's contention that the percentage of Black females in supervisory positions should equal the percentage of Black females in the employee pool, it still would not find discriminatory impact. Because the promotion of only 2 Black women into supervisory positions would have achieved the expected mean distribution of Black women within that job category, the court was unwilling to agree that a prima facie case of disparate impact had been proven. The court's rulings on Moore's sex and race claim left her with such a small statistical sample that even if she had proved that there were qualified Black women, she could not have shown discrimination under a disparate impact theory. Moore illustrates yet another way that anti-discrimination doctrine essentially erases Black women's distinct experiences and, as a result, deems their discrimination complaints groundless. Subsection 3, Payne versus Travenol. Black female plaintiffs have also encountered difficulty in their efforts to win certification as class representatives in some race discrimination actions. This problem typically arises in cases where statistics suggest significant disparities between Black and white workers and further disparities between Black men and Black women. Courts in some cases have denied certification based on logic that mirrors the rationale in Moore. The sex disparities between Black men and Black women created such conflicting interests that Black women could not possibly represent Black men adequately. In one such case, Payne versus Travenol, 2 Black female plaintiffs alleging race discrimination brought a class action suit on behalf of all Black employees at a pharmaceutical plant. The court refused, however, to allow the plaintiffs to represent Black males and granted the defendant's request to narrow the class to Black women only. Ultimately, the district court found that there had been extensive racial discrimination at the plant and awarded back pay and constructive seniority to the class of Black female employees. But despite its finding of general race discrimination, the court refused to extend the remedy to Black men for fear that their conflicting interests would not be adequately addressed, the Fifth Circuit affirmed. Notably, the plaintiffs in Travenol fared better than the similarly situated plaintiff in Moore. They were not denied use of meaningful statistics showing an overall pattern of race discrimination simply because there were no men in their class. The plaintiff's bid to represent all Black employees, however, like Moore's attempt to represent all women employees, failed as a consequence of the court's narrow view of class interest. Even though Travenol was a partial victory for Black women, the case specifically illustrates how anti-discrimination doctrine generally creates a dilemma for Black women. It forces them to choose between specifically articulating the intersectional aspects of their subordination, thereby risking their ability to represent Black men, or ignoring intersectionality in order to state a claim that would not lead to the exclusion of Black men. When one considers the political consequences of this dilemma, there is little wonder that many people within the Black community view the specific articulation of Black women's interest as dangerously divisive. In sum, several courts have proved unable to deal with intersectionality, although for contrasting reasons. In DeGraffenreid, the court refused to recognize the possibility of compound discrimination against Black women and analyzed their claim using the employment of white women as the historical base. As a consequence, the employment experiences of white women obscured the distinct discrimination Black women experienced. Conversely, in Moore, the court held that a Black woman could not use statistics reflecting the overall sex disparity in supervisory and upper-level labor jobs because she had not claimed discrimination as a woman, but only as a Black woman. The court would not entertain the notion that discrimination experienced by Black women is indeed sex discrimination, provable through disparate impact statistics on women. Finally, courts such as the one in Travenol have held that Black women cannot represent an entire class of Blacks due to presumed class conflicts in cases where sex additionally disadvantaged Black women. As a result, in the few cases where Black women are allowed to use overall statistics indicating racially disparate treatment, Black men may not be able to share in the remedy. Perhaps it appears to some that I've offered inconsistent criticisms of how Black women are treated in anti-discrimination law. I seem to be saying that in one case, Black women's claims were rejected and their experiences obscured because the court refused to acknowledge that the employment experience of Black women can be distinct from that of white women, while in other cases, the interests of Black women were harmed because Black women's claims were viewed as so distinct from the claims of either white women or Black men that the court denied to Black females representation of the larger class. It seems that I have to say that Black women are the same and harmed by being treated differently, or that they are different and harmed by being treated the same, but I cannot say both. This apparent contradiction is but another manifestation of the conceptual limitations of the single issue analysis that intersectionality challenges. The point is that Black women can experience discrimination in any number of ways, and that the contradiction arises from our assumptions that their claims of exclusion must be unidirectional. Consider an analogy to traffic in an intersection, coming and going in all four directions. Discrimination, like traffic through an intersection, may flow in one direction, and it may flow in another. If an accident happens in an intersection, it can be caused by cars traveling from any number of directions, and sometimes from all of them. Similarly, if a Black woman is harmed because she is in the intersection, her injury could result from sex discrimination or race discrimination. Judicial decisions which premise intersectional belief on a showing that Black women are specifically recognized as a class are analogous to a doctor's decision at the scene of an accident to treat an accident victim only if the injury is recognized by the medical insurance. Similarly, providing legal relief only when Black women show that their claims are based on race or on sex is analogous to calling an ambulance for the victim only after the driver responsible for the injuries is identified. But it is not always easy to reconstruct an accident. Sometimes the skid marks and the injuries simply indicate that they occurred simultaneously, frustrating efforts to determine which driver caused the harm. In these cases, the tendency seems to be that no driver is held responsible, no treatment is administered, and the involved parties simply get back in their cars and zoom away. To bring this back to a non-metaphorical level, I'm suggesting that black women can experience discrimination in ways that are both similar to and different from those experienced by white women and black men. Black women sometimes experience discrimination in ways similar to white women's experiences. Sometimes they share very similar experiences with black men. Yet, often they experience double discrimination, the combined effects of practices which discriminate on the basis of race and on the basis of sex. And sometimes they experience discrimination as black women, not the sum of race and sex discrimination, but as black women. Black women's experiences are much broader than the general categories that discrimination discourse provides. Yet, the continued insistence that black women's demands and needs be filtered through categorical analyses that completely obscure their experiences guarantees that their needs will seldom be addressed. Subsection B, the significance of doctrinal treatment of intersectionality. DeGraffenreid, Moore, and Travenol are doctrinal manifestations of a common political and theoretical approach to discrimination which operates to marginalize black women. Unable to grasp the importance of black women's intersectional experiences, not only courts, but feminist and civil rights thinkers as well have treated black women in ways that deny both the unique compoundedness of their situation and the centrality of their experiences to the larger classes of women and blacks. Black women are regarded either as too much like women or blacks, and the compounded nature of their experience is absorbed into the collective experiences of either group, or as too different, in which case black women's blackness or femaleness sometimes has placed their needs and perspectives at the margin of the feminist and black liberationist agendas. While it could be argued that this failure represents an absence of political will to include black women, I believe that it reflects an uncritical and disturbing acceptance of dominant ways of thinking about discrimination. Consider first the definition of discrimination that seems to be operative in anti-discrimination law. Discrimination which is wrongful proceeds from the identification of a specific class or category. Either a discriminator intentionally identifies this category, or a process is adopted which somehow disadvantages all members of this category. According to the dominant view, a discriminator treats all people within a race or sex category similarly. Any significant experiential or statistical variation within this group suggests either that the group is not being discriminated against or that conflicting interests exist which defeat any attempts to bring a common claim. Consequently, one generally cannot combine these categories. Race and sex, moreover, become significant only when they operate to explicitly disadvantage the victims. Because the privileging of whiteness or maleness is implicit, it is generally not perceived at all. Underlying this conception of discrimination is a view that the wrong which anti-discrimination law addresses is the use of race or gender factors to interfere with decisions that would otherwise be fair or neutral. This process-based definition is not grounded in a bottom-up commitment to improve the substantive conditions for those who are victimized by the interplay of numerous factors. Instead, the dominant message of anti-discrimination law is that it will regulate only the limited extent to which race or sex interferes with the process of determining outcomes. This narrow objective is facilitated by the top-down strategy of using a singular but-for analysis to ascertain the effects of race or sex. Because the scope of anti-discrimination law is so limited, sex and race discrimination have come to be defined in terms of the experiences of those who are privileged but for their racial or sexual characteristics. Put differently, the paradigm of sex discrimination tends to be based on the experiences of white women. The model of race discrimination tends to be based on the experiences of the most privileged blacks. Notions of what constitutes race and sex discrimination are, as a result, narrowly tailored to embrace only a small set of circumstances, none of which include discrimination against black women. To the extent that this general description is accurate, the following analogy can be useful for describing how black women are marginalized in the interface between anti-discrimination law and race and gender hierarchies. Imagine a basement which contains all people who are disadvantaged on the basis of race, sex, class, sexual preference, age, and/or physical ability. These people are stacked, feet standing on shoulders, with those on the bottom being disadvantaged by the full array of factors, up to the very top, where the heads of all those disadvantaged by a singular factor brush up against the ceiling. Their ceiling is actually the floor above which only those who are not disadvantaged in any way reside. In efforts to correct some aspects of domination, those above the ceiling admit from the basement only those who can say that but for the ceiling, they too would be in the upper room. A hatch is developed through which those placed immediately below can crawl. Yet this hatch is generally available only to those who, due to the singularity of their burden and their otherwise privileged position relative to those below, are in the position to crawl through. Those who are multiply burdened are generally left below unless they can somehow pull themselves into the groups that are permitted to squeeze through the hatch. As this analogy translates for black women, the problem is that they can receive protection only to the extent that their experiences are recognizably similar to those whose experiences tend to be reflected in anti-discrimination doctrine. If black women cannot conclusively say that but for their race or but for their gender, they would have been treated differently, they are not invited to climb through the hatch, but told to wait in the unprotected margin until they can be absorbed into the broader protected categories of race and sex. Despite the narrow scope of this dominant conception of discrimination and its tendency to marginalize those whose experiences cannot be described within the tightly drawn parameters, this approach has been regarded as the appropriate framework for addressing a range of problems. In much of feminist theory, and to some extent in anti-racist politics, this framework is reflected in the belief that sexism or racism can be meaningfully discussed without paying attention to the lives of those other than the race, gender, or class privileged. As a result, both feminist theory and anti-racist politics have been organized, in part, around the equation of racism with what happens to the black middle class or to black men, and the equation of sexism with what happens to white women. Looking at historical and contemporary issues in both the feminist and the civil rights communities, one can find ample evidence of how both communities' acceptance of the dominant framework of discrimination has hindered the development of an adequate theory and praxis to address problems of intersectionality. This adoption of a single issue framework for discrimination not only marginalizes black women within the very movements that claim them as part of their constituency, but it also makes the elusive goal of ending racism and patriarchy even more difficult to attain. Okay, that's the end of that section. So I'm about to take a break real quick and then I'll come back. Okay, I'm back, man. I'm GG, of course. You know who I am, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Look, I know this is not titillating. This is abstract academic literature, man. And for some, it might be difficult to comprehend. It's not entertaining, but I think it's essential precisely because if you want to know what intersectionality is at some point, you got to get it from the horse's mouth. You can't hear what other people have to say about it and just condemn it and denounce it. Check it out for what it is and see what the person who authored the theory, what it is exactly they're saying. So if you got any questions about it, I'll leave the link in the chat so that you can, come in and ask a question. This is not really a college class. All I'm doing is reading their paper, bro. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to BGS, man. Appreciate the donation, man. Real talk. Also, shout out to Milton Patton for the Cash App, bro. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And yeah, I get it, man. It's not titillating. It's not exciting and all of that. But, I think it's necessary to go over. But that's just my opinion, man. I mean, ultimately, she's trying to delve into the complexity related to the interplay of race and gender, okay? And other so-called social factors that contribute to the quote-unquote unique experiences of black women, okay? And she basically argues that traditional frameworks for understanding discrimination, they don't work for black women because they focus on single axis identities like race or gender without considering how they interact with one another or intersect with one another. And so she uses court cases, DeGraffenreid, Moore, and Travenol to illustrate how the legal system basically often fails to see the intersectional experiences of black women. Now, in these cases, the courts dismissed the claims of black women on the grounds that they couldn't prove discrimination based solely on either race or gender. And for Crenshaw, this is, in essence, a manifestation of how the legal system, and in addition to that, how, feminism as well as the civil rights movement have marginalized, have pushed black women to the periphery by failing to consider the compounded nature of their experiences, right? Okay, so what she does, Crenshaw does, I mean, she basically says the dominant idea of discrimination is too narrow. It's process-based, okay? And it marginalizes people who are multiply burdened. I think all of this, I mean, basically, in my viewpoint, man, all of this is predicated upon anti-discrimination law, bro. Or cis, whoever's out here. But the world, man, manifests in ways that extend beyond the analytical categories developed by the law, man. It's a fact. Okay, and I understand she wants to kind of interpolate what's going on in anti-discrimination law to feminism or feminist theory and to anti-racist ideals and all of that. But like, the primary paradigm that she's working with is anti-discrimination law, which, quite honestly, I don't think that the categories that are developed there are really actually useful or meaningful as it pertains to black people, man, dealing with, real world issues, man. And peep game when I say this. I just want you to, look, I know it's going to sound harsh for me to say it in this manner, but she's writing a paper, man, and basically using class action lawsuit or, cases in which black women are suing corporations or, companies like DeGraffenreid, like Travenol, right? These cases in which black women are suing corporations, but niggas is getting shot and fucking killed in the goddamn street, man. Niggas get killed in the street, and the best thing that you can come up with is the various ways in which black women feel like they are left out of corporate America or some shit. Come on, man. No disrespect, man. You know what I'm saying? The woman is clever, okay? She's not a dim-witted individual by any stretch of the imagination, okay? But I mean, for crying out loud, you have to have better examples. And I'm towards the latter half of this paper, I think she does use other examples, okay? But the primary examples, I mean, she leads with these cases, DeGraffenreid versus General Motors, Moore versus Hughes Helicopter, and Payne versus Travenol, okay? So, of course, you know, the plaintiff is, you know, always the antecedent in the versus statement, right? So DeGraffenreid is going to be the black woman, okay? Moore is going to be the black woman, and Payne is going to be the black woman, right? And you had to ask the question, like, why are these good case examples in various ways to explain how black men, to some, you know, like as a class of persons or as a category of persons, are more privileged than black women, especially like bourgeois black women who are fucking suing, who are suing fucking like corporations, bro.
It carries a hell of an air of privilege to it. That's the interesting thing.
I'm just asking, I'm asking the question. And instead of just going through like secondary literature or some blog post that talks about the importance of intersectionality, race, class, and gender, we're seeing the way that she developed these ideas in real time. This is the first time that the term was actually coined, okay, or utilized in a piece of academic literature. 1989, this article that I just read to you, you know, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a black feminist critique of anti-discrimination doctrine, feminist theory, and anti-racist politics, okay? And again, I'm gonna let you speak for it in a second, Rogas, but I'm just trying to, I find it ironic that like the way that she leads this discussion is by having a conversation with what I can't do. How else do you describe these women who like, how many motherfuckers do you know that got some bread sue anybody in relation to sue a corporation? Have you known any niggas in your life to sue the corporation?
Nah.
I'm being keeping it 100, man. You known anybody?
No.
I don't know. I'm personally, look.
Not personally, no.
I don't know no motherfuckers that sued no corporations, bro. No. I'm just keeping it a bean. Like, doesn't it take like bread? I mean, like first you got to get the attorney to sign on to the project to begin with. Then you got to pay for it. But I mean, assuming it's a class action case, then, you know, maybe the people who are really actually trying to push this, maybe there's some activism behind it or something like that. But I mean, come on, man.
I would assume it would cost as much as it would take for one to run for local politics.
Bro,
that's still a sizable amount.
It's just a question, man. It was just a question, okay? But let me do this, man, before I even move forward. Look, I know this is not titillating in terms of a subject, man. I get it. But shout out to BGS. Shout out to Second Gear, Grab Second Gear Eddie. Appreciate it. And shout out to Delmar Wilson, man. Shout out to him, man. Appreciate that. And again, why do I think it's important? It's important because this is the first paper where you even hear the term utilized. And it's one thing, you know, to refer to secondary literature in order to try to understand and grasp the concept. But it's another thing altogether to look at the individual themselves and to see what they're arguing and what they're actually saying. And I'll say this. In principle, I'm not really like posing an objection to black women arguing that they're being discriminated against by corporations. In principle, I don't have an issue with that. But you know what I do have an issue with? You know what I do take umbrage with? What's up, Doc? What's up, Doc Johnson? What's up with you, man? You know what I take umbrage with? The very fact that in order to make the case, she has to posit black men as somehow the benefactor of some fucking, I don't know, some abstract notion of privilege, man. I absolutely deplore when feminists do this. Because they take men and they place all men, which one could argue, man, you know how many different classes of men there are, or men with different kind of issues who are subjected to all kinds of different forms of what? Oppression, privilege, I mean, whatever the case may be. But taking all men, lumping them into one large class and saying all of them motherfuckers are privileged is ridiculous to me, man.
Hey, yo, dude, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man. Go ahead.
I'm in the truck, man.
Rogus, you want to concede your time to him initially, or do you want me to, you know?
No, he sound like he might be on the road, so he might be limited.
So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give you. Go ahead, man.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me that time. I'll be quick and keep it short. I think that the idea utterly fails because you have to assume that. Is that coming from me, man?
Yeah, that's you, bro.
Yeah,
You sound like you on O'Shea Duke Jackson channel when the music come on. The little whistle shit start blowing on this channel.
Yeah,
is that any better or is it worse?
It's a lot
you sound
better.
like you standing next to an old.
All right, so I think that the idea fails for a multitude of reasons. One of which you pointed out. I think the second reason is that you have to test the theory and prove whether or not it's true or false. And I think that she has failed to test the theory.
Yeah, so yeah, you got a little bit of feedback going on there, and I agree with that, and that's why I prefaced my reading of this article with some some scholars and their views on like what they think is perhaps maybe missing within the scope and the range of this kind of theorization. Now, I mean, look, ultimately, this is a legal scholar, okay? Now, she's a legal scholar working with philosophical ideas or abstract categories, right, or metaphysical categories as delineated by legal precedent, okay? Now, I mean, I don't know what you know, but like, I mean,
what validates the splicing that she did? The fact that, all right, a black woman is supposed to be able to have, is it flexing some element of agency that they should be able to flex within the society, given it to themselves? Because it seemed like she's trying to abstract just out of the singularity of blackness at that time. And it's like, well, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, well, we're a black woman. Well, yeah, you're part of the black family that is, you know what I'm saying, being assaulted, if you will.
At the end of the day, what she is, look, again, here's the criticisms that are issued against Crenshaw, okay? Now, first of all, you have to understand what she's trying to do, okay? What she does, essentially, right, is she's laying her argument out by discussing the limitations of legal doctrine in addressing the unique ways in which black women are discriminated against by means of race, and also the various ways in which they're discriminated against because of their sex, okay? Now, it's an analytical argument, okay, using analytical categories as described or as implemented in the lexicon of, jurisprudence understanding by the law, particularly Title VII of the fucking, the Civil Rights Act. It is what it is. These are categories that were created by law, okay? And anti-discrimination legislation drafted into law to deal with a specific concrete set of circumstances, okay? Now, like I said before, I think My idea is that sex was added to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prevent it from ever passing in the first place, or in the event that it did, to ensure that if any advantages, right, any like extra rights were given to anybody, it would be given to white women before it would be given to black women, or to black men in general. Doesn't take a genius to see how this shit is gonna work out. Like, I mean,
Right.
But we already know, I've already stated that Howard Smith, Virginian Democrat, leader of the conservative arm or branch of the Democratic Party at the time, he's the one that introduced this prior to the Democratic Party flipping to Republican, okay? Now, all I'm trying to articulate is that Kimberlé Crenshaw is basically saying, look, there are various ways in which black women are discriminated against, in which black men aren't or white women aren't. But I'm like, what's so fucking unique about that? Like, there are ways that black men are discriminated against that black women aren't, right? I mean, one could argue, and then one could also argue, I don't know if I want to add that same, condition to white women, but I would even go so far as to say that I probably can abstract away from racial privilege and to discuss the various ways in which white women might also have multiple or intersecting forms of oppression enacted upon them. Like, why stop with the categories of race, class, and gender? Why not say, like again, why not add sex to it? Why not add hair color to it? Like blondes versus brunettes. Why not add short white feminists as opposed to tall ones? Why not talk about pretty ones instead of ugly ones? Why not talk about fat ones instead of skinny ones? Like, I mean, how many categories do you want to add to this shit? And like, what's to stop you conceptually from stopping short only on race or gender or class? I'm just throwing it out there, okay? So those are my examples. Like, what's to stop somebody from saying, well, like, they have pretty privilege, because even that's being added to the equation now. She's prettier than I am, so like, I'm ugly, and so therefore, like, I suffer from like discrimination. I can't move up the ladder because of my ugliness. And I'm a woman, and I'm white, and I'm a brunette, but blondes have all the fun. Now, I'm not, look, but I think PK is right about this, okay? One could argue that, like, you could sidestep this whole additive idea of intersectionality, right? But I don't think that, I think whatever you say, maybe the theory can be adjusted and modified so as to, sidestep the criticism of the double jeopardy thesis or the additive criticism that's acted against it. And what that criticism is that it seems to promote like an additive mode where it just doesn't add up or hold up under empirical scrutiny, right? So it basically says, and the double jeopardy thesis is basically this: black women have twice the amount of oppression. And you see, like, in various places, she says shit like multiply burdened. Black women are multiply burdened. What does that mean? It means that to me, it's like we got it twice as hard.
But defined by what measure, though? Because if there's a personal black woman measurement outside of the black one, that everybody tends to operate on as the default.
No, it's just, well, it could be, but the whole point is this. It just doesn't seem to hold true that just because you belong to a category, that means your life is twice as hard or you're suffering from twice the amount of discrimination. And another thing that you got to understand is this. You might, like, I mean, I know it's fucked up to say this, but it's possible, conceptually, that you can be a member of two so-called oppressed classes, but still be privileged as a motherfucker.
Facts.
Or am I wrong about this? You had Negroes who were free during slavery and who owned slaves. Mm-hmm. and we're educated. You understand what I'm saying? Like, is that not privilege? Above and beyond that of somebody who's forced to work in the fields?
It is.
Or maybe perhaps their lives are better off. I'm not trying to say that this is something that's I could generalize, but I'm just saying you can imagine a situation in which a person actually belongs to these analytical categories, but their experiences never so-called intersect with real world, like concrete displays of the kind of discrimination that they could encounter by being a member of that so-called category.
Right.
Like, I mean, like, take for example, Kimberlé Crenshaw. Come on, lady, you're a fucking Ivy League professor, lady. You're an Ivy League professor. I want you to explain to me how all of this oppression has worked out for you. Specifically. How's it really actually, like intersected with your own life? So at any rate, there are people who say the double jeopardy thesis, it seems to suggest that black women have twice the amount of oppression. And when you do that, and in order to do that, you have to argue that other groups of black people, specifically black men, and then you can take this further, right? Black straight men are privileged, whereas the black gay woman is like at the nadir. She's at the bottom of the well. But then you can be a straight black male and get motherfucking gunned down in the street. Which would you rather be? Kimberlé Crenshaw or Mike Brown? Now, I'm not saying it ain't no balling ass black men, because there's some balling ass black men out here as well. But I'm just saying, just because you belong to a category doesn't mean you're dealing with that kind of oppression in a concrete way. It doesn't, okay? And then also, I think PK is right when he talks about the subordinate male hypothesis, target hypothesis, or like developing some empirical grounds to demonstrate that your theory is viable. You can't just, I guess lawyers can, because lawyers are not scientists, bro. It don't take a genius to understand, like a lawyer is not engaged in testing hypotheses in the same manner that a chemist would. Or in the same manner that a biologist would. That's just not the kind of shit that they do. They work with categories. They are more philosophers than they are scientists. Or maybe you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but that will make law what?
Man, come on, dude. You already know how motherfuckers think about the law and what they think about lawyers. Come on, man. Like, do you hold, no disrespect, but do you hold, I fucks with lawyers, okay? I got a lot of friends that are lawyers and shit like that.
Best friend's a lawyer. Yeah.
But do you hold, like, the attorney up to the same level of, like, honor and esteem as a fucking physicist in terms of, like, like the weightiness of what it is that they're studying and the difficulty?
No, you do not. No, you do not.
Not
right off the bat.
You just don't, man.
Right.
And then a lot of times, a lot of people, perceive lawyers as exploitative, like they're manipulative, they're looking for money. They don't really disclose, like, the intricacies of the kind of cases that they're dealing with. Like for example, like, did it really require you to pay this motherfucker 5 G's for him to get your ass, what you would have got with a, like, regardless, you know what I'm saying? Like,
same in the medical field. It's just the way that the game goes. But see, that brings us right back to the okay. It might be there might be efficacy in their development of it as far as intersectionality, but the fact that you have to split hairs, and you're openly splitting some hairs that definitely doesn't need to be split. And to do so, you're going to break up whatever social calculation that you have. It's like the zero-sum game. They don't think that they're cutting from anywhere. They think that they're making money right out, what I'm saying, fresh out of thin air or something, as far as it goes with the social context of I guess, what, the victim Olympics or something like that. I don't know. It's weird, but again, that shows you the power of feminism. The fact that, okay, you do have to have some element to where there is a level of okay. Women have never really been fully absorbed within, a pilgrim society. I rate the United States as being such as well, right? And when it comes to the United States making this change of this shift into, I guess, a more politically savvy style of society, okay, well, people do get to play the intersectionality game now, because, okay, if the white man is the big bad, everything that cascades down from there now has to have some form of placement. Think Johnny Five now alive. What do you do with this new, this new population of citizenry that you didn't really acknowledge at first? You have to, permit them to lead in some form of fashion. But I think it's particular when it comes to particularly black intersectionalities or black intersectionists, because we just exist in a very particular position within this nation.
Look,
and you can't forget that when you're giving an assessment or an announcement.
Well, look, in principle, let me just say this again. I don't have an issue with black women saying that the fucking corporation structure, the corporate structure in the United States is unfair to them, and that they need relief. Even if they develop an intersectional argument, I wouldn't have any, real deep objections to it. But for, to use the language she utilized, but for the fact that it throws black men under the bus to achieve that aim and establishes that there's some sort of privilege that black men enjoy.
Right.
I just, why do you even have to do that shit? Why do you have to introduce us into the equation? Well, I think that they do so precisely because maybe perhaps of what was indicated to them by the court, the judges themselves, right, when the decisions were handed down. Mm. But, I mean, come on, lady. Look, the people already, I'll show you the passage where the court already understood the game that was being played in these cases, and they were like, we not going for that shit. Not for real. Not for long. I'll show you the point. Let me see. Window.
But the thing, the ill part is you must permit their say so though, because they didn't have a voice before, and it's like, all right, well, the voice that they chose is okay. Let's run loops around the system.
Here's the first statement by the court, and I laughed at this shit when I read it. I laughed when I heard it. The plaintiffs have failed to cite any decisions which have stated that black women are special. They're a special class to be protected from discrimination. The court's own research has failed to disclose such a decision. The plaintiffs are entitled to a remedy if they have been discriminated against. However, they should not be allowed to combine statutory remedies to create a new super remedy, right? Which would give them relief beyond what the drafters of the relevant statutes intended. Thus, this lawsuit must be examined to see if it states a cause of action for race discrimination, sex discrimination, or alternatively either, but not a combination of both. So in other words, they don't want to put them together, okay? Now, I personally don't have an issue with it, but here's what they say next. The legislative history surrounding Title VII does not indicate that the goal of the statute was to create a new classification of black women who would have greater standing than, for example, a black male. The prospect of the creation of new classes of protected minorities governed only by the mathematical principles of permutation and combination clearly raises the prospect of opening the hackneyed Pandora's box. So in other words, they were like, okay, if we go down this route,
yeah,
we'll be opening up a can of worms that we ain't gonna be able to put back into this damn bottle. Okay?
That's minority.
Because it's based on the idea that we can take the female category, the black category, and add them together and demonstrate that this causes double oppression. Yeah. Now, of course, conceptually, it seems, intuitively, it makes sense. Okay, well, women are oppressed. Okay, black people are oppressed. So, like, if you're black and you're a woman, then you ought to be doubly oppressed. But then, like when you start to look at real world data, then you have to ask the question, does this really make any sense? Like what measurements do you want to start with? Life expectancy? What do you want to start with? Like education? Like where do you want to go with this? You want to talk about incarceration rates? You want to talk about levels of homelessness? Like levels of homicide? Levels of early sexual debut? Like where do you really want to go with this shit? Now, not to say that black women don't have unique problems, but that's the issue. Everybody who exists on the planet has unique forms of experiences that only they can understand because, only you know that kind of life.
Right.
Like, what's so special about you motherfuckers? Like, can you say that now? Like the same things that were said, like in terms of education. We already know that black women get more degrees than black men as it pertains to undergraduate education and graduate education in many disciplines at the university level. What is do we need a super remedy for black men? At what point?
In what way have we presented ourselves to be somewhat of a specialized class? I think this is what Black Uru gets into when he speaks upon there being a legal separation of black men from black women having gone through, their experience of our, black reality in a completely different fashion from slave ship all the way up to the present, and through the intentions of the misandric intentions, specifically,
I'm telling you what's happened. Black women took the axiology of white women, which basically asserts that women are oppressed. Now look, I'm not here to one way or the other, man. You can think what you want to think. I'm not here to tell you what you can and what you can't think. You can think whatever you want to think. But one thing I know, the more I look at it, I want you to think about this. I show this shit all the time. I got to keep showing it. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to make it big. Do these motherfuckers look oppressed to you, man? I'm just asking a simple question.
Nope. Look like they're all.
Do they look oppressed to you, man? They look like they missing meals and like living in filth and squalor and shit?
Nope. Look like they're all included,
I'm just asking. Like, look. They're the ones, they are the oppressors. Look at them. Like, all right, don't bust these niggas to our schools. Look, they're laughing at the girl. I guess, in some instances it's a novelty thing. Like, look at this motherfucker, the brown skinned girl. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
But they look like their lives are like suffering where they can't develop their capacities, their abilities and shit. Like, they got Klan hoods on and shit, man. Now they're a minority group, just in virtue of the fact that the Civil Rights Act included sex, man. Now all women everywhere can now claim that they're a member of an oppressed group. And I'm asking the question, how the fuck were they ever admitted into being, like, just because they're women, however was it the case that they were admitted into being a member of, like, so-called, victims of oppression, like, on a fucking real for real scale in American culture and society, bro? When?
As a political ploy, you can't, it's pretty much second to none, because they didn't want to include black people to the degree that a sole black civil right endeavor would have done, as far as if they would have passed legislation like that.
Anytime you got white women, man, who can get a nigga hung from a tree, I would say that she's got more power to oppress than that Negro does. Like, I don't know how that nigga's privilege is hanging from this goddamn tree right here. Over above either that woman right there with a flat pancake ass and them two little girls sitting right there. Or like the black women who's hung with this brother. Like, like those women don't look like they're just like they're suffering from like, you know, they can't like move, you know, they free to roam around the cabin as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Look like they got the support from the cast behind them.
They look free to me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be ignorant. They don't look like they missing meals and shit. They don't look dirty and destitute. I'm just saying. They're the main ones who are arguing they're on the wrong side of history related to race, man. It's a fact. They're on the wrong side of history, man. But now they're a minority group. They used to burn crosses and help develop bombs and shit like that and Molotov cocktails, shit like this.
Now, could that have been accomplished without the black woman's support in their endeavor of pushing gender as, you know what I'm saying?
It really didn't have nothing to do with black women, man. That shit didn't have nothing to do with black women.
I'm saying support, though, because did it get passed by white women just presenting, yo, this is our gender, this is our feminism, whatever it is? And they say, okay, well, listen to you, bitch. That's what it is. Or did they have to get? Well,
no, black women were not critical. Black women were not part of the process, man, of determining whether or not sex was going to be added to the Civil Rights Act of '64, man. We're talking about a time in which black people, I mean, largely, weren't even involved, like, in a substantive way, in the electoral process, either at the local, the state, or the national level. You didn't, like, the Voting Rights Act was passed when? Do you know? 65.
65. I almost said 67.
The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. That means, like you can go vote without having to worry about ending up in the back of a pickup truck and taking, hung up from a tree.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, like, were they actually integral in getting this bill passed? Not really.
Well, maybe that was the entry to the whole gender principle being inserted, because with the voting rights,
You said you had white women help blacks too. You can't be totally disingenuous. Look, bro. Look. You had Quakers and Puritans and all kinds of different fucking a cast of characters. Holy Rollers, Quakers, and a whole bunch of, you got all kind of people, man, in the United States. You had some white abolitionists. But let's just be frank, man. By and large, were you honestly going to propose that the vast majority of white women in the United States did the best that they could to ensure that black people, for the most part, were fucking free, man? Is that what you're proposing? I want to know. I would like to fucking know. And if so, I would like for you to come up and demonstrate to me that that actually is the case. I really want you to demonstrate to me that that was the case. Oh, there's so many white women who were fucking like rubbing us, giving us food and pig feet and chitlins and shit, extra shit from the table. We talking about the United States. We ain't talking about African kings, motherfucker. We ain't talking about African kings, bro. We ain't talking about African kings right now. Come on up, man. I want to hear this. I want to hear the argument that, like, there's good and bad in everyone. Like, so what we gonna sing? Ebony Ivory now and shit? All the sins of the past, we'd all be forgiven because everybody, is this. Some people are bad, some people are good. Bro, Bring your ass here, boy. Come on up, man. You got so much to say, man. Come on, Daffy. Come on in. Come on through. Come on in. Come on, man. I'm tired of hearing all these fake ass conservative talking points. Well, black people are killing each other. Hey, look, man. Cain killed Abel, man. What's that got to do with an entire system of racial oppression and domination that's yet to be rectified? What does it have to do with it, man? What does it have? What's one have to do with the other? I'm telling you a historical reality about an entire group who, personally, I don't think white women deserve. First of all, in terms of literal numbers, they outnumber even white males in the population. They outnumber white males. They live longer than white males. But then the argument I get is, well, you know, niggas is killing each other in the hood. So fucking what, nigga? So what? This shit kills me, man. Exactly. The Russians killing Ukrainians right now. The Hootsies killing the Tootsies, motherfucker. The French killed the British. The Americans killed, the American colonialists killed the British. The North killed the fucking South. What does that have to do with what the fuck we talking about right now, man? It's the shit that kills me, bro. You can't be disingenuous, you know, like, because there are white women who are really, like, really good to you. You fucking serious, man?
But that's what happens when you critique the system and people get on that reflexive defense.
Bro, I showed pictures of white women, man, standing around niggas getting fucking hung from trees. Yeah. And the first thing I get is, you know, well, they all weren't bad.
Not all of them. Ain't that a bitch?
They weren't all bad.
So that means that you can't give a critique to the possible character of, you know what I'm saying, of the group. Come on now. But see, this, to me, that's hella slavish, personally. I think it's hella slavish.
Ain't nothing to say. You ain't said nothing. All you saying is, it's some good white women out here. What the fuck? So what? What? That's a red herring argument, bro. It's a straw man argument. So fucking what? You're going to realize in the morning. I'm saying that in general, when you begin to look at injustice and how it panned out in the United States, what was the reason to ensure that sex was added to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 when you had centuries of black people who were held in slavery or were subjected to Jim Crow? Were white women subjected to that shit? Bro, this the shit. It fucks me up, man, to hear people say shit like this. And then they bring up conservative talking point. You guys kill each other, you know, while, you know, black people are shooting each other in the hood. And if that stops, then we can argue, we can begin to take on the task of talking about justice in other regards. But until all crime is eliminated, well, we can't do anything about any historical injustices that ever obtained in the United States. So that's the direction we supposed to go with this shit, right?
Forever.
Till all injustice is eliminated and all criminality is done away with in the hood, Only then can we begin to explore justice-related issues in the United States related to discrimination along the lines of race. Come on, man. And then, look. See this lady right here? I put this video on here myself, man. I'm gonna show you. Now, one can argue Phyllis Schlafly is like one of the fucking leaders of the conservative movement. Like, and she was anti, women, the equal rights, amendment. But she's deeply conservative, right? Listen to what this white lady says.
Civil rights. He said the back of the bus, and you said no. That
Can you hear that?
Civil rights question has moved to the federal level. I support that.
Well, why civil rights on race but not on sex?
Because it's a different question. Women have not been treated like blacks. I certainly do not subscribe to the view that women have been treated like blacks.
Now, did you hear?
Yep.
This lady telling you, I'm not an asshole enough to sit here and say that white people in the United States, white women, have been treated like blacks. They got a whole series on this lady. You ever seen the series?
I'm not seeing the series, no.
Phyllis Schlafly. It's a series based on the life of Phyllis Schlafly and her organizing and activism related to the Equal Rights Amendment and her participation in conservative politics and how she, some could argue, helped to get Reagan elected to the president of the United States. But she was kind of got stiffed in the end because he didn't offer her a cabinet position, and she probably should have been offered one. We probably would know more about her if she was actually offered, a cabinet position. But I mean, ultimately, she
should have been a thorn, and she would have been a thorn in his side come the mid '80s.
Yeah, she probably would have.
with those kind of perspectives that she was
yeah, she's
showing there.
But I mean, hey, so like one of the most conservative ladies out here is like, well, even I got enough good sense to see that women weren't treated like blacks. And then you got Negroes who'll be like, well, some white ladies were good. And look, I don't hate like white ladies for real, man. I got some white, friends, women friends. But I ain't gonna sit there and cap in front of them. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna tell them the truth. Like as a class, man, y'all didn't even fucking deserve to be interpolated into the Title VII, for real. Y'all know it.
I mean, the thing it's not about protecting them; it's about being real. But with the thing is, though, if you have black women who are, and as far as with what the sister created, setting the standard for intersectionality, defining it. I think what it is we got to ask ourselves, what does it mean? What does it mean to be black to us then? If it's not resonating to the degree to where I guess it's politically monolithic when it needs to be, you know what I mean?
I'm just trying to demonstrate to y'all. Let me see if I can find this. Privilege. I'm trying to find text. I'm gonna point to the points at which she talks about black men having privilege. Because she says it, what? Okay, let's see how many times she says it. I'm going to the beginning of the article. Let me not put the word privileged, but privilege. Okay, so I won't do it. Whole words, case sensitive. Won't do it, man. Mother, father. Okay, so let's look at all the instances in which the word privilege pops up. Okay, I'm not going to start in any particular order. And who is she referring to when she says it? Relatively privileged employees, probably, that's qualified language, Privileged employees are probably better off guarding their advantage while jockeying against others to gain more. I thought that was ironic. I'm like, well, damn, like, aren't women like better off? Aren't they to some degree in relation to black men? If it's the case that the subordinate target hypothesis rings true, isn't it possible that maybe they're the ones who actually enjoy privilege and they're utilizing categories established by white women for their own self-serving reasons, or white folks by their own self-serving reasons, that you're doing more of the same and compounding, if you want to start talking about additive, forms of injustice, might you not be compounding the injustice that obtains in this culture? But anyway, look. Relatively privileged employees, as a result, black women, of course the implication is black women aren't privileged at all.
Right.
I mean, all of this is just saying, like, you ever heard, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. This is like, to me, like a fucking, like a Ivy League blues riff.
Yeah.
Because the scope of anti-discrimination law is so limited, sex and race discrimination have come to be defined in terms of the experiences of those who are privileged but for their racial or sexual characteristics. And we know who those are. But for race, I'm male. Or but for sex, which is a white woman. So the experiences of white women or the most privileged blacks. But we know who she's talking about when she talks about the most privileged blacks. She's talking about black men.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. This hatch is generally available only to those who, due to the singularity of their burden, they only got one axis of burden to deal with. They're otherwise privileged to those below. Of course, the people who are below are who? Women.
Right.
Black women specifically, because of how they exist at the intersection. Okay? Without paying attention to the lives of those other than race, gender, or class privilege. Now, I mean, she does it, talk about class, but very few times. Black middle class or black men. Like, so, okay, I guess if a black woman is part of the middle class, is she privileged? I mean, I'm confused because there's some ambiguity there. Like, are the women who are suing these corporations in these class action lawsuits, are they members of the middle class?
I would definitely, they definitely resonate as being privileged. The fact that you, like you said earlier, you sued a corporation. You have to have.
Man, I don't know no niggas nowhere.
Yeah.
In my life from the hood. I'm from the hood.
Yeah.
Now, they might have gotten a car accident or some shit like that. They got hit by, like the city of St. Louis that might have sued them or something.
Right.
You say that to be sexist, GT. You can't say that. Man, I'm just, man, look. Anyway, middle class or black men, the equation of sexism with what happens to white women. Non-privileged women, we know who they are, because white women are privileged, right?
Right.
But non-privileged women are black women. So like a person like Kimberlé Crenshaw is not privileged, even though this motherfucking lady I guarantee she a millionaire off intersectionality alone. Guaranteed,
okay,
bro.
But the thing is, okay, so if black women are non-privileged to her, what is the privilege that she's seeking to participate within? Is the privilege considered a status thing, or is it considered a greater navigation, or what? I mean,
all she's trying to do is say that black women suffer a double disadvantage because they get it from being women and they get it from being black.
Right.
And you can't, their concerns are marginalized not only in anti-discrimination law, but they're marginalized in the context of feminist theorization, and they're also marginalized as it pertains to anti-racist or like pro-black politics, because their concerns aren't registered. I mean, those are the arguments that are being made. And so all I'm doing, I'm giving you her way of articulating her ideas instead of secondary literature. These are her arguments. The only thing I'm saying is you don't start to see. I mean, you saw in 74, an articulation of black male privilege by the Combahee River Collective. They talk about black men, being. I don't remember really actually them being said to be privileged as much as they're said to be sexist.
Okay.
Now that I do know is said. I had to go back and read it some more, go over it again with a fine-tooth comb to determine whether or not it's actually the case that the word privilege was used in it. Actually, fuck it, let me go through it now. Combahee River Collective. All I'm saying is,
So
if you're trying to convince me that a woman has the same kind of discrimination experiences as the average black person, I'm saying you're fucking crazy. That's what I'm saying. Okay, they do say privilege twice in this document. Racial, they make a reference to sexual privilege. Look, let me show you. Remove this. Share. But it's only once that it's said. It's not said on multiple occasions. It's said twice. Here and here. Those are the only time privilege is used in this article. Class privilege. We do not have racial, sexual, heterosexual, or class privilege. So there's racial privilege, which is white, sexual privilege, which is male, heterosexual privilege, which, you get that, and then there's class privilege. So we don't have that.
Wait, heterosexual privilege beats out class privilege.
If you tell me Barbara Smith does not have class privilege, I'm going to say you a fucking lie. You're lying.
That's funny.
She's a fucking professor, man. I don't, look, she's a member of the black intelligentsia, but she's saying she doesn't have privilege. Right. We're not, I'm like, come on, lady, let's just keep it a bean, man. Like, who can write like this that doesn't have privilege? You're educated. You're privileged enough to be educated. You don't have access to power? Come on, like let's just be honest, man. But I think ultimately the move that they made is to basically, they partitioned themselves off from black men by saying that they were worse off than us. That's what they did. And by doing that, I mean, ultimately what they did was they were able to take advantage of civil rights legislation that opened up a pathway for all women to get some gimmies, goodies, and grab-ems. And so this is a way for them getting some gimmies, goodies, and grab-ems. Basically, essentially. Just is what it is.
I mean, it's. I think it's like I asked you last time when you had the first installment of this. Was it that she could read the tea leaves of how, I guess potent the civil rights movement was, and how you could stratify the classification of blackness politically for all these different endeavors, and foreseeing that, okay, you know what, this new categorization is going to yield to some pretty swift power acquisitions. And I mean, and if you think about it, just using black and blackness and black people for what the United States has always done, you know what I mean? On and off in the mash out. Thank you for the sharpening, though. Respect, brother.
Hey, look, so check this out. The one thing that, kind of sparked my interest, like one of the things Tommy Curry said a long time ago was like, to this day, you still don't have a peer-reviewed paper by a social scientific theorist that demonstrates that like black male privilege is actually a thing. If that's the case, why do you have women just consistently saying this shit? It's the categories, right? This is why, like Curry says, this is not really actually the study of black people at all. It's just a moral philosophy. It's a moral imperative that benefits a certain demographic of black people. It's not something, and then he says, to some degree, this is all centered around like economic interest and positions and openings in corporations and in academia and in government. I mean, and she leads with it. Like, let's face it, dude. She talks. The paper starts off with women talking about how they're treated by corporations, and now like they need to be sued in order to challenge these these organizations because they feel like they're fired or they're not getting paid as much as men. Either black men or white women are. Mm-hmm. But then now you have to say, okay, well, let's do an update on this. Let's do a deep dive into like the disparities between black men and women in corporate America, higher education. Let's do a deep dive and try to figure out like who's more privileged based on empirical data. And they don't do it because if they do it, they know that they'll get blown out of the water. They'll be like, okay, well, let's stop.
Right. So there must mean that there is some intention for such a study upon us not to be exposed. Hence, what I'm saying, I think by the black manosphere is the thorn in the side.
But the black manosphere really is a lot of guys, man, lamenting about the way they, it's relationship based primarily. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. It's cool.
I see evolutions out of that though, because the thing is the environment is grown so toxic. You're gonna to charge women generally to holding to a traditionalist perspective of family. Nobody is going to be able to do that within the system the way that it's going. You know what I'm saying? Let alone us possibly restoring or fixing or whatever what's already been wrong with ours for like 70 years. Yeah, I think it's just, something being terraformed. And I don't know. I do see the space evolving from just that primary style of rhetoric.
So hold on, I'm looking at the I'm looking at these chat comments, man. But look, man, I done been here long enough, man, and I know this is not titillating, it's not exciting. I'm not going back and forth jabber jocking, with some chick saying, you need to submit some shit like that. Oh man, or you need to respect us. You need to marry these good men out here and stop chasing Pookies and Ray Rays and shit. And stop having your ass on your shoulders. It's not that kind of conversation right now. I get it, man.
I can dig it.
I mean, this is what like guys say they don't want to hear that shit, but like that's the first shit that they latch on to. Real talk. I hate to say it.
Well, look, personally, again, if we talking families, I'm down for it. But if largely we talking hoes, I don't want to talk hoes. I don't talk hoes. You know what I'm saying? Hoes ain't for talking.
Yeah, man. I mean, I got my issues with these women out here, man. I do got some deep-seated issues with some of the shit that they do. Like, I got some issues with the... Okay, so this paper, like I said before, the only problem I have with her in this paper really is that, she's basically saying that, like, black women are at the nadir, which means they're at the bottom of the bottom, whereas black men are somehow, like at the top.
Right.
Like in terms of race. Like we're like there's so much benefit that we share because we have penises. It's penis privilege.
Ain't that some shit? But okay, but it doesn't usher us into ease of having one of those corporations that they want to contend with. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It seems like it's all a convenience. It's all a convenience, and it's permitted to be passed as such simply because we're the ones who's largely losing out, and that's why I say with the whole the way I see this nation, it's not racist. I think it's largely anti-black man. That's what it is, and anything that's attached to us. We say racism, then that includes everybody of whatever color or whatever the fuck. Nah, This shit is anti-black man enrichment and everything that is connected to us. And so, you know what I'm saying, that's how this fucking red herring of a perspective that she was presenting could get a pass. It's like, oh, you know, our blackness is different. We're a female, and our femaleness is different from the white female's femaleness. So we should get that an equivalated femaleness and blackness. I mean, it was weird, bro, but the fact that it passed, it makes sense.
Look,
it created a hybrid that they can't deal with now.
I agree to some. Look, this is what I agree with black women about. That, like, sometimes they are rendered invisible.
Okay.
Like, sometimes they aren't seen.
Okay, but that's up to the system having an appetite for them like that. That's the thing. Is if you approach this morally, look at the picture that you showed, bro. The fact that anybody are expected any elements of moralism behind this, that's the odd part with me. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not surprised. And the fact that they are surprised, okay, that means a lot of people are pining largely for white acceptance or pilgrim acceptance or something. You know what I mean? It'd be different if it was just for a position to where, okay, let's get us in a position of power to where they could accumulate power until, you know, unto their black woman selves. But the fact that they needed the allyship like that shows that, okay, it was merely just a leg up. It was a hustle, just like you said with old girl. The very first volume that you presented of whatever it was that she wrote, it showed that she knew exactly what was going on from a 100% black culture perspective, as well as that of the expertise that she's in. So it's like, okay, come on, you're splitting hairs.
So one thing I'm not about, well, I mean, she's paid to split hairs. I mean, that's what academicians do. But at the end of the day, I just think that ever since the Combahee River Collective, man, it's been put forth the idea that, like, they're the most oppressed. And if they're free, then everybody else is going to be free, because by freeing them, you would dismantle all the systems of oppression, right? Mm. And I just think this is, like, it's not a very sophisticated idea, but this is where we are, man. Like,
I mean, but if the system of oppression is patriarchy, and that means that they're casting a blanket over defining what the power of patriarchy is for, you know what I'm saying? Simply just based off of how it's been for the past history. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't tell of that why not permit one that could be, you know what I'm saying, more righteous or whatever. You know, it's like, nah, you're a man. Anything that you're presenting as a man is going to be, you know, egotistical, overpowered, it's going to be over the top. It's like, okay, well, this is just convenient for this system. So that means more that you're working on behalf of your, you know, whatever your slave attachment is to the system, as opposed to understanding
this is some woke shit on. When white women declared that they were victims, it just opened up a pathway to say that, look, I'm more victim than you is.
Yeah. You can make up whatever the hell you want to.
But I mean, come on, man. Like white women open up that pathway.
Yeah.
Okay, it just is what it is. Like, the pathway was open, but it wasn't white women who opened it, really. It was a white man. Like, it was a Donald Trump type. He's the one that opened it up. A conservative fucking Democrat did it, bro. So they have nobody to blame but themselves, man. They're the ones that started this shit. So I don't want to hear nothing, Van, from none of them guys talking about, oh, you know, I hate woke politics. Then why did you add sex to the Civil Rights Act 1964? Why? If you wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't be where we are. I mean, I showed you. I'll show you one more time.
Okay, but then where would we be to where it would be a more preferred state for those who aren't us in the equation? You know what I'm saying? It would definitely be the more preferred state for us, but we aren't the only ones that are, you know what I'm saying, operating within the society and operating either, you know, within our benefit or against our benefit. You got a lot that are banking it against us. So I don't know. It's again. I think it puts this nation in a dilemma to where its tribalism shows up as opposed to its projected storefront of a blanketed citizenry or something.
The Civil Rights Act of 64 prohibited discrimination based on race, religion, color, or national origin in public places, schools, and employment. But discrimination based on sex was not initially included in the proposed bill and was only added as an amendment in Title VII in an attempt to prevent its passage. Some jackass, conservative jackass named Congressman Howard Smith from Virginia. He was the chairman of the Rules Committee and a hater, a staunch opponent of civil rights. Yeah, he hated it. I don't want these, like he's a force busting, no. I don't want to go to school with these niggers, these mongrelization of American culture with these monkeys. These are the facts. I don't want to be nowhere around them. Keep them where they are. Send them to Africa if you need be. So anyway, he let the bill go to the full House only under the threat of a discharge petition. During the floor debate, he offered an amendment that added sex to the original 4 categories, but only in Title VII, equal employment opportunity. Now, these people are not stupid. Why would he do this? Although Smith has supported the idea of an equal rights amendment for women nearly 20 years at that point, his amendment to the Civil Rights Bill was likely intended to kill the measure. But it didn't have the desired effect, and the bill was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson on July 2nd, 1964. And after that was done, the government began work on policies that would enforce the new laws. Because once you create something in the law, you have to enforce it, correct?
Right.
As a result, Executive Order 11-246 was issued to address compliance with civil rights regulations. However, it made no mention of discrimination based on sex. The omission of women's rights did not go unnoticed. Many women and advocacy groups wrote to Lyndon Johnson expressing the need to expand 11-246 to include enforcement of discrimination against women. Following are samples of letters sent to Johnson. Now, I'm not going to read these letters, but
Shit.
These are letters sent to Johnson. Like, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Once you create the law, you got people who are going to want to take advantage of the law.
Read one of them.
Okay, let's read one.
They don't look like
okay?
they long. Shit.
If I can, okay. View in National Archives log. Let's read what Now has to say. I can't even see it.
Oh shit! It said 1956 too. Interesting document.
Not yet available.
Okay.
I'll try to expand
So this
it
cat
and
was
make
an
it
advocate. He was an advocate for women's rights. He just wasn't using it as a sabotage, understanding, and
I'm
hoping.
trying to tell you. He tried to sink the bill by throwing some shit he didn't think was gonna pass, man.
Wow. You know what? That's just
so anyway. He
was
was sent. Okay, so look. So now that the shit was passed, they're like, okay, dear Mr. Watson, confirming my recent telephone conversation with your secretary, the officers of Now, very much appreciate your prompt response to our November 11 letter to the president. We now like to request the president to meet with the 5 national officers of Now to discuss the questions indicated in our letter. If the president would be kind enough to see us at any time after the first week of January, we would come to Washington for this purpose at the president's convenience. I hope to have a word from you soon regarding a date for the appointment so that we can plan accordingly. This is the National Organization of Women. So that's Betty Friedan. The president has asked me to acknowledge and thank you for your letter of March 6, 1967, in which you report that the board of directors of Now has voted in support of the proposed Civil Rights Act of 1967, you also urge that the president take action to prohibit discrimination on account of sex in federal employment. There you go. You want these jobs.
Wow.
I mean, come on. Now, who do you think would be writing letters like this if sex wasn't added into it?
Oh, that'd be us.
And there you go. Not to say, look, I'm all for it though. Like, you know, women, you want to work. It's all, I don't have an issue with it. You know what I'm saying? I don't. But to act as if women, like, as a class of persons, had no political influence, and that they were like controlled in a despotic way in the United States, I don't agree with it, man. It's too simplistic of a picture. I don't buy it, man.
And that we participated in wielding such power, in wielding the intention of that power, simply because we got penises. All right, then.
Well, you're part of a class of persons. See, this is the thing that gets me. To me, they perceive patriarchy in a kind of Marxian way. Mm-hmm. And it creates like a broad dichotomy based upon sex, which I think is just, it's non-nuanced. That it's stupid if you ask me. All men are privileged. Like, really? Like, so you mean to tell me that, like, Mike Brown is more privileged than, like, Kimberlé Crenshaw and shit? Like, he's got more cultural cachet than, like, you know, like the current vice president of the United States. You know, some nigga on the block because he got a dick. Come on, man. Like, keep it, like who? Lil Yachty got more cultural influence, more privilege than fucking, like, the vice president of the United States. It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yo, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
All right, cool.
But
I mean,
anyway,
I had
man,
a lot to say, but I'm gonna leave it alone. We'll probably come back around to it, man. It was mostly about what we done moved so far away from it now that we kind of talking around it, around the original context of what you were this particular woman with the intersectionality and whatnot, Kimberlé Crenshaw and whatnot. But I'll come back to it.
okay, cool. Yeah, well, you know, at the end of the day, look, man, I know this is not titillating, but I think it's, you know, like, this is stuff I could use later on in my conversations with y'all, and to demonstrate, like, these are the concepts and the ideas being espoused. Like, literally, like, I don't have to go to secondary literature or what people wrote about what she wrote. We can go right to what she said. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think that ultimately what she's saying is that black women have, they're doubly disadvantaged. They're multiply disadvantaged over black men. And I just don't think it's accurate. And this paper, though, is really not, like, something that, like, gets me up in arms. The only thing that I take umbrage with this is that she posits that black men have privilege.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually tried to point that out in the comments section. I don't know if you were able to read or gloss over any of that, man. You actually are, not you, but that's actually a feminist claim. And so when you try to argue it, argumentation against it is actually sacrilege to the Church of Feminism in general. It's actually just being transported from one context of the feminist lens to the black feminist lens, because this actually underpins a lot of feminist argumentation. So privilege is synonymous with sex. What
Correct.
they do is that they attach one with the other by virtue of the fact that you were born with different chromosomes. There's no particular analytical claim attached to it outside of that virtue, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's ascribing a quality or a characteristic to a person based on an accidental property of who they are. Yes. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, or they say things like, well, you know, because white men are privileged, all men are privileged, which to me it just makes no sense at all. Or because all men, like are given, some sort of advantage because like the people at the top of the food chain look like them. Or have the same, sexual equipment as them. Like, wasn't it the case that like black men had the same sexual junk and equipment as like the white slave masters, but didn't have access to white women and shit? If we had privilege like they did, we'd be able to fuck you and they women.
Well, funny enough, that's kind of, it's ironic and sad and disgusting on many different levels, because they would actually make the argument that, we were out there, quote unquote, taking advantage of white women even back then. That's the type of argumentation that they're using today, and even in some of the literature.
Who's using that argumentation? Who's using that?
Your black feminists. They don't realize they're using that. That's what they're using. They're actually making some of these claims by virtue of the arguments that they make. They're actually pulling, they're using white supremacist cachet to make some of these arguments against black men in particular for why they should be elevated in status above us.
Yes, so the only thing I said is this, man, look. All dogs are canines, but not all canines are dogs. All wolves, foxes, and coyotes are canines, but not dogs. All humans are primates, but not all primates are human. All lions are felines, but not all felines are lions. There are jaguars, there are leopards, there are tigers. All of them are felines, but they're not lions. All patriarchs may have been men, but it's not true that all men are patriarchs. There have been male peasants, slaves, butlers, eunuchs, vassals, lieges, more so than there have been kings, lords, emperors, and sovereigns. So stop saying like that all men are part of the fucking patriarchy and benefit from it. It's stupid. It's not even thoughtful. It's not reflective. But it does work it works to the advantage of white women, to say those kind of things. But they kind of borrow from the Marxian tradition, which kind of puts, it bifurcates like humanity into the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. This is a similar move. Like, so women by de facto become members of the proletariat and all men are like part of the bourgeoisie. Now it's difficult to pull this move off, but I think ultimately black women try to pull it off by means of talking about sexual dominance, like rape and assault and violence and shit like this. This is where the patriarchy really actually earns its keep, so to speak. That's the next move. Like, this move here is not an egregious move to me. I'm just saying, like, I don't like it, but it's not egregious. It's not something that like, I'm like, I can't stand you bitches for this.
I don't know. It's pretty damning in my view.
But it allows them to make the next move, which she doesn't do in this paper. Like, this paper is, to me, relatively benign. I'm just being honest. Because, I mean, her focus is primarily directed outwards. Although it does, to some degree, she talks about black men being privileged. She doesn't detail the ways in which they actually are. And mostly they don't. I mean, like, what are you going to say? Like, how do you demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that black men have privilege other than through the assumption?
Because the assumption is already supported by the statement in and of itself. You don't have to prove that assumption. You just have to make the statement, because by virtue of the feminist ideal, these two things are one and the same. That's why I'm saying you can't actually circumvent that. I mean, unfortunately. And that's why I say it's damning, because it sets up a lot of negative primitives. It sets up a lot of negative purviews and stereotypes that have already been associated with black men going back to Jim Crow, slavery, etc., that were made by white supremacists. That's why I say you actually can't shirk that, and it's a damning claim in and of itself.
Yeah, the one thing I did was, and this is ultimately what I said, like, I kind of piggyback on, like, let me look it up. Yeah, so there are different interpretations of what patriarchy actually is. But from a Marxian perspective, it basically says that, like, there are hard and fast categories which demonstrate that there's male dominance over women, and that, all females in the category, a woman kind of fall into the proletariat, all men, kind of fall into the category of bourgeoisie, okay? And it's a kind of polar Zoroastrianism or Manichaeism, if you ask me, okay? However, I just say, well, imagine a black male slave having privileges that white female slave owners don't have. It's just a flawed taxonomic system. It's a flawed system of explaining reality. So in the place of patriarchy being defined in this way, there are other people who define it differently, like Curry, Errol Miller, Max Weber, and they basically argue that patriarchy is a covenant system in which a small group of older men, a small group of powerful and older men, develop frat bonds or fraternal bonds to ward off threats from other men. Okay? And it has more explanatory power. It seems more accurate, it's a more accurate depiction of reality than the one offered up by feminists, and within it, not all men have power. Say, for example, just think about the divine right of kings and the men that had privilege in that system. Maybe the nobles had privilege. Maybe, kings and members of the clergy had privilege. But the average peasant didn't have privilege that a noble woman, didn't have. I understand what they're trying to accomplish, but it's just sloppy. But in my viewpoint, second wave feminism really arrives on the scene to perform a specific function, which is to take advantage of legislation that a jackass basically initiated in order to block the civil rights bill from passing in the first place. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
It's a good story. It's accurate, bro.
Some people say, well, it was, not really. Man, come on, man. This jackass proposed that shit because he thought it would stop the bill from getting passed. And it worked to the advantage of certain people who are already operating the push in this direction. And it just so happens that, there are a group of women, black women, who, are entering into the academy and they're learning from these white women, and they're using the same axiological principles to develop their own. I ain't gonna say you can't blame them, but I just think it's a natural product of the legislation itself. I just don't like it. Somebody's got to respond to it. And here's the response. We are responding to it. Maybe not successfully. I think so, but
I think the response is warranted. I think that there are a lot of valiant efforts to it. I think there was always going to be a response. It's just a matter of to what extent, you know what I mean? So different people, you have an idea about, second wave is the cutoff point. And I respect that. I don't necessarily, me individually, I don't see it the same way, but I understand that, everyone isn't going to get to the same place on this though, I think. And so
the tragedy of all of this is that it really hasn't elevated us anywhere. It hasn't gotten us anywhere. We're still in the same fucking place. We haven't elevated ourselves. That's the issue. And now we've created the conditions in which conversations centered around race have become, to some people, absurd. Unimportant because it's been pushed too far. The limitations of social acceptance and what's normal and what's acceptable have been pushed to the limit, to the point where, now sex is anything, you can say anything related to sex, and it doesn't really even seem to make sense. You have to call me her. But man, dude, I see your dick print, man, bulging out of your shorts, bro. Sis. Whatever the fuck. You know what I'm saying? It's come on, man. Like, I mean, lady, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy, man. Like, one time, I saw a man, visibly this motherfucker looked like a man, but he had on a dress.
Hey, man, I just ate, man. Come on, man.
And he had lipstick sloppily, put all over his fucking lips. And I went to shake the hand of this individual, and I said, hey, sir. And I didn't mean to, but I couldn't help it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, God damn. And, I was in a fucking feminist class, man, and I said that shit. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause I was taking the course. All I could do is be like, damn, I done pissed these motherfuckers off, but fuck it, though. What can I do now? I done already did it. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is.
I mean, those social faux pas are just basically, we're running into these issues. It's happening all over the place. It's not, just a you problem. That's just we're running into these things in our everyday lives, and I think
I ain't mean to do it, bro. All I know
you can't not do it. That's the issue. It's actually baked into the pie, on in a natural sense. It's like trying to tell someone to not believe their lying eyes, like to not perceive reality in the sense in which we're experiencing it. It's really strange to me. But we're trying to play with ideas that are essentially baked into the human psyche over hundreds of thousands of years, and trying to inherently change them on a social scale, which is, we're running into problems doing that, extreme problems. Because we're trying to institute it by virtue of social policy and law, and it isn't working out to anyone's benefit, really, truthfully. Now, if we start to iron this, nail this down to black people, or pin it down to black people specifically, we're getting screwed the worst.
Bro, hey, look. All I can say is, man, I didn't mean to offend. Like, I don't mean to offend anybody. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to make somebody uncomfortable and shit like that. And I wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't like, like I was sitting there like being repulsed by this individual. However, I mean, come on, man. The motherfucker looked like a man. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just habit, the force of habit. You know what I'm saying? I'm not around trans people all the time, or people cross-dressing, or whatever the fucking case may be. I'm not around it. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, hey, it is what it is. The only thing I don't like, and didn't like from the very beginning, was for a trans woman, like especially a white motherfucker, to call me privileged. That shit gets my fucking goat, bro.
Hey, your woman does it too. It's all good. You're privileged, man. Trans woman ain't wrong, right?
No, man. I ain't gonna say it's acceptable from a black woman, but I could at least understand to some degree. Like, I can understand, like, I can open up the possibility to entertain that kind of conversation with a black woman. But a white motherfucking, a white man who's decided to transition to a woman, now they gonna tell me I'm privileged? Oh, man, get the fuck out of here, man. I don't want to hear that shit.
It was a natural, just as you explained earlier, it's a natural consequence, or it's an evolution of that sort of type of language. I mean, even the fucking the judge that was presiding over that case said the same thing. It was the opening of Pandora's box. You get this as the consequence of the former. Like, this is how we got here, and it's only going to continue to get worse. I mean, unless you really, I said it a while ago, and you said you want to stop at 2.0, but I'm just being honest, man. These things are natural. They're internally consistent, and so it follows off of a daisy chain of logic. So you can't actually escape, the effects of 3.0 without going back to 2. You can't escape the effects of 2 without going back to 1. These are natural consequences of one another.
My man says intersectionality has made everything more confusing. It's the politics of recognition that white women started counteracting with civil rights. And that's the truth. It's affluent white women's politics without the capital. And that's my issue with it. Like, that's my issue with the shit. I don't look. I said this before. There's the politics of distribution and there's the politics of recognition. White women wanted recognition. And, you know, like, it wasn't like they were hurting for anything, but I mean, they wanted to be acknowledged as valuable. I want to contribute. So, I mean, shit, they got to contribute, I guess. And so, you know, the only thing that, it's managed to do was to kind of disrupt the natural ecology or the natural relationship between men and women that kind of existed prior. Maybe to the chagrin of people who wanted to express their sexuality in different ways and didn't or weren't able to find a way to do that successfully in this culture. And I get that. I understand that. You know, like this culture is puritanical, okay? And, one could argue that it needed to be, to some degree, lightened up a bit, okay? Too much puritanism and prudishness, creates all kind of counterproductive, psychological pathologies in and of itself. I guess.
Man, we can't be out here burning witches at the stake and shit just because we don't like what they saying. That shit wild. But
too much prudishness. I think America was pretty prude. You know what I mean? And a little bit maybe too puritanical and stiff.
Extremely so. Yeah.
However, I don't think that like to push to like anything goes or like turning the world upside on its head. I don't necessarily know if that's the right move either. But I mean, at the end of the day, I just think because white women were the ones who initiated, well, I won't say initiated, but they're the primary beneficiaries out of all of this. They basically were able to hijack the civil rights movement because white women are going to get what they, like women just get what they want in general anyway from men. I mean, am I wrong about this? Like when women say, honey, I want this.
It's a matter of measure. That's the issue because you're making a qualitative assessment over a quantitative issue, and they understand that. And I think that what men in large part don't understand is that women are actually making the argument about having more. They're not arguing whether or not they get some. They just saying they want more of what it is they already get. That's what they're arguing for. And so it's not as though they're not getting it, like you said.
No, I think something's different's happening. Okay, like okay. So look, let me just say this. I don't have a problem with rights rhetoric. I don't have a problem with freedom. I think everybody should be free, okay? I think everybody should have the capacity to participate in decision-making processes that impact their lives. So I'm an advocate of participative democracy. I believe women just as much as men should be able to be in the workforce or in politics or be able to hold offices and positions in society, civil or public, other, whatever, okay? I don't have a problem with it, okay? The only thing I do have a problem with is while that's occurring, a whole bunch of women claiming, that they need special like protections and shit like that. But that's where you and I kind of differ. But let me just say this. On top of that, though, like I know full well though, like that Western culture and any culture in general, like the leaders of those cultures are going to be military leaders primarily. That's how nations start, man. Like, I mean, like the first president of this motherfucker was a general, right? He was elected to the presidency for a reason. Because he was one of the most successful and persuasive militaristic leaders in the nation. So they were like, okay, we want you to lead us. That's how this shit goes. That's how power is accumulated. And that's who it falls to. People who are actually able to secure or to grab territory and to eliminate threats. That's how this shit goes. But the nomenclature of power has changed in the United States or in the world, Western world in general. So it's no longer about like who can secure or power or annex land or who can lead people in the battle. It's about, a race to, use democracy in order to gain, positions and shit like this. And I guess it's cool, but like at some point things will be restored when the shit hits the fan, my guy. It's just now that's when nature is gonna, because peace is never permanent. That's one thing you can be rest assured of. And no society has lasted the test of time. Everything rises and falls. Rome, it rose and it fell. Egypt rose and it fell. America, I mean, you know, like if the history is any prediction of what'll happen, you know, in the future, this motherfucker will fall too. Like nobody holds on to power forever. It's like the Lakers, just like they got a dynasty over basketball for like ever. Nobody can hold this shit forever, man. Nobody can. So, anyway, man, I'm about to sign off, man. I'm hungry as hell. I'm about to eat. But shout out to Jinkazi. Shout out to Will R. He said it was a trans person that came up with the Duluth model, right? No, I don't think they were trans, but I think they were lesbian, but you know. He said that same person admitted that the Duluth model didn't get it all right. Now, she did. She wrote an article entitled Some Thoughts on Philosophy in an article, in a journal entitled Community Responses to Domestic Violence. And she admitted in some of the, parts of that article that, you know, she was engaged in cognitive bias and that they were trying to sell guilt. And I'm like, man, fuck you. She dead now. She can't really, you can't. Like, what can she do? She's fucking deceased now. So, like, what can you do? But, like, I mean, nobody wants to go back and look at people retracting their statements. They only deal with, like, the machinery that's put in place. And it kind of confirms their own, their narratives. So the narrative is that men, hurt women and that women are vulnerable and they need so much protection. They need. They need somebody to come help them out. Because otherwise they wouldn't know how they would make it. Yeah.
Well, you was about to make me lose my food, bringing up the whole, lipstick on a pig situation, bro. Like, come on, bro. Like, goddamn, you hungry, man. I just got done eating, man. What type of shit is this?
Man. All I know is I just got really, I was really offended when this white trans person told me I was privileged, and like looking at my life, I couldn't really reconcile the statement. But the point is, this trans person wouldn't have been able to make that statement if it weren't for people like Kimberlé Crenshaw, like openly stating that that black men have privilege. And then okay, even if I do, let's say I do, you don't get to fucking tell me, even black women were pissed off that this motherfucker was telling me that shit. You know what I'm saying? Black feminist women were pissed that this motherfucker was saying this shit to me. But I'm like, y'all open up the door for the motherfucker to be able to say it.
Hey man, you know what they say? No, I can't say that. That wouldn't be. All right, don't laugh. All right, let's just not laugh. Let's all be adults in the room here. Okay. You know what they say? When you give them an inch, they take a mile. Pause. We're just gonna leave that alone. We're gonna leave that alone. But,
you've been watching too much. It is what it is, man. You've been watching too much Mace and Cam, man. Yeah. But anyway, man, Murder Mace, Killer Cam, I'll holler at y'all, man. Shout out to y'all, man. We'll be back on, man. I don't know when I'll be back on, man. I guess, man, I'll be back on sometime soon. I'll probably be back on, man, at Short Bus Saturday, man. You feel me? I might do another one of these, but this shit, man, dude, you know how much time it takes for me to do this, man? I have to read that shit. And I record it because, I want it to sound like, I'm not stammering over passages. And even then, I still stammer over some of the passages. But it should take, this shit took me 2 hours to do, bro.
Bro, this is one of the things that dissuaded me from going into higher education, because when you give critical thought to some of these arguments, bro, it's I don't know, personally, number one, I'm lazy in the first place. Number two, you're not going to put no dumbass fucking argument in front of me and just get this shit off and have me be cool with it. And it's I understand that some things in society are being taken seriously, but I'm going to be honest with you. We got a lot of dumb shit going on in a lot of different areas, especially when it comes to academics. A lot of dumb shit. And it boggles my fucking mind how this shit even got instituted in the first place, and how no one with any sort of critical thinking skills were able to let this shit go by like this. It boggles my mind, because at the very first, mention of any of this, you can catch this in so many traps. It's not even funny. So the fact that people even bother to take the time to read any of this dumb shit, not you, I'm just saying in general, it blows me the fuck away, because it's like you could dismantle it so easily. Just think about it. Just use your brain. Think about it critically.
But I mean, look, bro, at the end of the day, you got to understand, man, this is, this is writing that grows out of a tradition that's already, standing, on two legs, man. This ain't like a woman pioneering on her own in the wilderness. Like, there's a pathway that's been cleared for her to make these kind of claims. And, I mean, she studies anti-discrimination law, and sex was entered into the equation. So, like, there is a discourse surrounding it. And she's not the only one. She's just a black voice in it. Okay? And, she's not disrupting any of the primary, axiological assumptions of feminism. Not really. So, this is welcome. This is like, some shit like, like I said, I don't really have an issue with this one. But I do have an issue with what's to come in, with her third paper. That paper right there is fucked up, if you ask me. Like, and I think the third paper is an apology for the carceral state to be directed towards black men, meaning like the prison state, to protect black women. Like, almost, it's like a re-establishment of lynch logic, if you ask me. That's how I perceive it. We getting hurt. We need protection like white women from the brutal, beastly black men that are in our proximity. And you see the shit today. I mean, like, the brick lady, how many different chicks, man, like, if they go through like some sort of discomfort or some sort of struggle with a dude, like, it's all the patriarchy now. Like, you ask them what they did, they didn't do shit. They was just sitting on the motherfucking, sitting on, a fucking stump eating their curds and whey and shit. Along came a spider that sat right beside her. That's how the game is, man. So, anyway, man, y'all be peaceful, man. I'll holler at y'all later, man.
Peace.
Peace.